Hello, welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following me as I explore my wide world of pens. And this video is going to focus on a particular pen manufacturer from Japan. Hopefully you can recognize these pens. They're all made by Sailor. And we have a little bit of a historical span of these pens. And they're mostly 1911s with two Pro Gears, a Magellan, and a pocket pen. The pocket pen's just here for reference, so we're not going to look at it in any detail. But these all have somewhat different nibs in them, and I think it would be nice to explore Sailor Nibs. A number of viewers has asked about that. And also we could discuss the difference. I only have the 1911 standards. This is a Pro Gear regular, if you want to call it, and this is a Pro Gear Mini. So it's interesting is the 1911 called them standard, and they had a 1911 large, and of course they also then have the King of Pens, which comes in both the 1911 style and the Pro Gear style. The main difference between the 1911 and the Pro Gear is the finials at the top. So the 1911 have your bullet-shaped here, your Schaefer balance design, and this is also shown in this Magellan pen here. One as far as diameter goes here, but certainly not the longest one. That goes to the Magellan. So we're going to list the different nibs based on Sailor designations so you can get see the range here. Then we're going to uncap them and take a look at those nibs. As this is a Sailor focused video, but obviously not just Sailor pens, I thought we might just revisit the history of Sailor pen. It was started in 1911, and its founder was introduced to fountain pens from a visitor from England and decided that he would make fountain pens great. And he called the company Sailor because he expected eventually that the pens would be used around the world, and they were. They were originally formed in Hiroshima, and they still are there today. Interesting little bit of history. So posted, they take on a little bit of a different look, but not much. These earlier models here have a different design of the nib, and we'll look at that a little bit closer later on. They also have this little metal ring at the bottom of the section. Sections are pretty much shaped the same on all of these pens, with the Pro Gear being the largest diameter, but not a significant amount. The Pro Gear also has the larger nib of these groups of pens. We have one here which is rhodium plated, which matches the trim of the pen. It's a nice sparkly purple. And I put these two together because these are both 21 karat nibs, and Sailor 1911 was sold in Japan with a 21 karat nib, so obviously this pen was originally sourced in Japan. I bought most of these from Japanese sellers. I like the two-color look on this one, something they've kind of brought back in their cocktail series. We have a finial and a section, but in the cocktail series, the section does not match the finials. And these are two older ones, and these have some interesting nibs, which is why I purchased them. So let's zoom in on those nibs. We can see a little bit more of the design differences between these older style nibs and the newer style. I actually really prefer this older style with a simple acre on it. The first 21 karat nib I got, let's look at that a little closer. So we have here on the far left a 14 karat, a 21 karat, you know, same design, same everything. And then the larger 21 karat nib on the Pro Gear, which has a Naga Togi nib on it, so that looks a little bit different. And we'll definitely explore that nib a little bit later. Let's look at the old versus the new stampings. These are the older ones here. And yes, that's a broad nib. And this is the newer one. I just think this is a clean design. I prefer a simpler nib design than a more complex nib design as far as the stampings and engravings on it, because they really don't lend themselves one way or the other to improving or changing the writing experience. They're just there for your visual entertainment. How they changed that design, you know, they added to 1911. The anchor got smaller. The 14K got a little bit smaller. So, interesting things that they changed. The things that's consistent with every nib here is on the left side of the nib, they have stamped in 2 letters. An S for soft, a B for broad, an H for hard, an F for fine. And that's consistent across all of the nibs here. So here's 2 other examples. The Naga Togi nib, I'll mispronounce that over and over again, is a medium. So there's an N-M on that. And the silver rhodium Pro Gear is a hard MF or medium fine. I'm just impressed with how consistent they are and what they've done. Very few pen makers have done that. To answer the obvious question, yes, you can Frankenize your 1911 standard with the Pro Gear Slim Mini, a bunch of names that it's had. Certainly not a color combination that one might be attracted to, but it certainly does show how these parts, these injection molded parts, are all done to the same dimensions. Pilot also has the same situation with the 74 and the 91. One's a flat top, one's a rounded top. Very similar to what Sailor has done with the 1911 and the Pro Gear. And we can take these and they screw together like they were meant to go together. And now we have a Frankenized Pilot. Unlike Sailor that pretty much uses the same clip on all of their models, same design, Pilot kind of changes it up a little bit. But this is an example of one way of getting economy by having very similar parts. Sections are the same. So these pens serve multiple uses, and it's a high quality plastic, but it is a plastic and it will scratch and it will show wear like anything will, but this is a instrument that's meant to be used, and when you use it, it will show its use. So why do I think Sailors are excellent pens and deserve their place among the great pen makers? Is their consistent attention to detail. So this is the Magellan, the oldest one that I have, from the mid-1990s. And all Sailors seem to have this metal piece that's part of the section. And they all have little O-rings at the bottom. A lot of people complain about the fact that the majority of Sailor pens are cartridge converter pens, but I think, again, economy of scale, and it does work. And for those of you that change inks a lot, this is the only filling system that I think you should use, because emptying out and cleaning out pistons and vac fillers are not something I look forward to. So when you screw down the barrel, that last turn, which is about less than 1/8 of a turn, just seals up against that O-ring. You know, number one, it's going to minimize that barrel unscrewing, which happens with some models. But like I said, I'm just impressed with the overall design. And of course, there's that ball clip that we saw on the Pilots. But Sailor didn't follow through with it. They went to their more traditional clip on all their pens. So we're going to go a little bit upscale, a little bit higher on the economic ladder. So here I have the Pro Gear Regular next to a Pilot 742, next to a Platinum President, and then the 3776 here in the Bourgogne. So one of the things that you'll notice is that the Sailor is definitely the shortest by a good deal from these other pens. The girth is good, which is kind of what most people judge it on. And yes, you can post this and it fits in the hand well. The 742 is the longest pen of this group. One of the things that you'll notice is so many similarities amongst these three Japanese pen makers is the smaller and larger bands at the end of the cap. They all have a band at the end of the barrel, which serves no purpose. It's no blind cap. There's no reason for it except for aesthetics. Maybe to match the ring they all have at the top finial. And that top finial design allows you to assemble these pieces. Again, I think it's a good economical way to manufacture it, and it works and functions as it should. There's a lot of variety here in clips, but again, you know, Sailor pretty much follows this same tiered design clip, at least now, for all of their pens. I'm not familiar with the King of Pens, so maybe the higher-end pens might have a little bit different clip on it. But as you see, the Platinums do have some variety in their clips, but the ball on that Pilot is still kind of unique, but more of a vintage look than a modern look. So here are the 4 pens posted, and the Pro Gear now kind of like fits more into the overall length posted. The President and the 742 are fairly close. They all have a gold ring between the barrel and the section, and the President has another gold-colored ring next to the nib. Let's focus in on that sections and nibs. So these are all standard, nice-looking gold nibs with some interesting engravings on them. They're all labeled as to their gold content. The President is also nicely labeled, and it's two-tone, but that's the coarse nib that I really like, and you can see that tipping material on the President. Here's a nice music nib in my Pilot 742, and this is the Pro Gear with a Naga Togi nib, and this is just a standard 3776 with a ultra extra fine nib, and you can see how fine that tipping material is. It's a nice range of nibs there. The sections on all of these pens are fairly comfortable. The 3776 is the smallest, the Pilot is the largest, and the Pro Gear and the President fall in between those two. They're all comfortable to write with, and the nibs are very, very nice. We got a 21 karat, 18 karat, and 2 14s. For the writing portion of this video, we're going to look at these 4 pens, 2 Sailors, one with a fine nib and one with that medium Naga Togi nib. So you couldn't get, I don't think, much more of a variation between those 2 nibs. Here's the Platinum with the coarse nib and the Pilot 74 with the music nib. And I like larger nibs, juicier nibs, and these 3 here certainly are great examples of that. And I felt it would be good to show the fine nib with the same ink as the Togi nib, so you can take a look at that and see how the nib influences the way the ink looks on paper. I mentioned that I buy my Sailor pens primarily on eBay and primarily from Japanese sellers. So a recent search showed these examples. If you want a particular nib, you need to search for a particular auction with that nib in it, but there's a lot of color variations. Some of the rarer colors have a higher price to them. I mean, my 1911s, when I bought them a few years ago, I don't think I paid anything more than $100 for any of them, including the one with the 21 karat nib. At the time I was buying on eBay, there wasn't as much activity on the pens, so I was able to get them for, I thought, an excellent price. And they were delivered relatively quickly, and they all worked great and were received in great condition, so that's the important part. So I think you need to learn what you're comfortable buying, what you're comfortable spending, And hopefully, watching videos like this, you can determine whether it's worth taking some money out of your pocket and turning it into a writing instrument. So we're going to start with this 1911 standard, and yes, it's kind of an interesting color combination. I find it quite appealing. Kind of reminds me of that dual fold design, but with the Schaefer balance overall design. The black finial top and bottom and the black section are what remind me of the dual fold design. So this is a a hard fine nib. There's that HF on the side, and that's definitely a fine point on that. Plastic feeds, I think everything except some of the maybe really high-end King of Pens are going to have plastic feeds, but they work great. I've never taken any nibs out of a Sailor pen and don't plan to. I think they've done their job tuning that nib and putting it together well. Not something I'm going to be able to make better. Without posting, I think the 1911 standard fits okay. It's a light pen. We'll give you the weights. And as expected with this type of design, it posts very deeply, very securely, and doesn't really change the balance. It only adds a little bit to the weight overall. So this is a pen I could definitely write with posted. This is also a pen that was in my daily carry for probably 6 months or so. So it got used every day, and it's a workhorse pen. It is definitely an everyday carry pen. And the fine nib worked good because I was writing on a lot of paper that wasn't quite the best, and that nib worked great on all the papers. Enough said, let's put some ink on paper. So this is definitely a fine, bordering on extra fine, which is what you would expect with a Japanese nib size. You do get feedback with this nib on paper, which is classic of Sailor. It's a heavy pencil type feel. It does lay down a really nice line, and this is Newler's Navajo Turquoise, which we all know I really like. And this writes with no pressure, which to me is one of the traits of Sailor nibs. So from that viewpoint, it's great to use. And I have kind of a heavy hand, and that's when you really notice the feedback. Some might call it scratchy, but I certainly don't. But with no pressure, there's very little feedback, and it feels beautiful on the paper. So if I was going to rate this pen, I'd give it a 9.6. 2 checks for the nib. Even though I'm not a fine nib guy, this works and works wonders. You know, 2 checks for the build, the quality, and 2 checks for the fact that it's a dependable, everyday writer, a pen that you can use day in and day out with ease. Next up is the Pro Gear, and this is equal to the 1911 large as far as girth goes. And as we saw, it's not an overly long pen. It's almost on the short side. And they do actually make a Pro Gear Mini, which is very short and considered like a pocket-style pen. This definitely has more weight to it than the standard does. And it fits about the same in the hand, but that section is much bigger. We'll give you the sections size between this and the 1911 standard, so you can put that in perspective. The threads you can feel, but they're not sharp. I like that little flare out at the end. So this is a comfortable pen to write with and to hold in the hand. It does post deeply and securely, and it does add a little weight to it. We'll give you the weights. And if I didn't say anything about it before, most of the Pro Gears had that nice little anchor at the top of the cap finial, which is just a nice little touch, and you can watch it while you sit there and write with the pen. So let's write with this Naga, not the Togi nib. The first thing that's super impressive about this nib, and it is absolutely, unbelievably smooth. You can hear it on the paper, and it does have a little bit of that pencil type feedback, which Sailor is known for, which I happen to like. And this is a wet writer. There's no question about that. And like the design, which is similar to the Zoom nib design, is your vertical strokes are a little bit thinner. If you bring the nib down to a normal writing angle, you'll see the stroke definitely gets much wider, and especially in the horizontal direction. So that's the characteristics of a Togi nib like this. Unlike an architect, which doesn't provide you with thicker vertical strokes, except the horizontal strokes are the ones that are wider, this one gives you wider strokes in both horizontal and vertical, depending upon the angle. But it is just an absolute pleasure to write with. And you notice I used a bigger script or font because you're not going to write small with this. I haven't done reverse with this that I can remember, so let's do reverse, and it is not doable. I need to do some work on it, which you can do. You can do the same type of smoothing on the opposite side of a nib if you want, if you wanted to make certain this wrote extra fine, but I'm not going to do that. So let's rate this pen. And I'm going to give it a 9.9. And the first time I've done this, the nib gets 3 checks. The build, design, and construction gets 2 checks. It's not a 10.0 because I wouldn't call this an everyday writer. It's not something you're going to write on lesser quality paper because it'll just bleed right through and feather phenomenally. And this Navajo turquoise ink, the same as we had in the 1911 fine nib. And we can take a look at that fact that that's a phenomenal variation in a nib. And Sailor does make an extra fine nib. Can't imagine how fine that would be, but I think, and they also make a broad Naga Togi nib, and I can't imagine that's what that's like, but these are the two I have. So we're now on to the Pilot 74 with that music nib in it. And I didn't use the larger 742 model because I like this number 5 nib better than the number 10 nib in the other Pilot that I have. And the 74 is a little bit longer, probably be more comfortable with people with slightly larger hands. The section is a good size. We'll give you the section dimensions. And as with the Sailors, it posts deeply, it posts securely, and it doesn't really change the balance much. This is definitely a pen you could write with posted. Let's just take a quick look at that music nib in action. So I think you saw that this is definitely a wet nib. It definitely has that stub-like quality to it. So the horizontal strokes are fine to medium, and the vertical strokes are definitely broad, and you can push it. It is a nice soft nib. The other music nibs in Platinum and Sailors are on the stiff side, and that's why I prefer this one. It just works great. I mean, the first time I wrote with this, I was very impressed and very happy with it. It's definitely a nib I enjoy writing letters with. And this is Diamond Ancient Copper, which I think really works well in this nib. So we're going to finish up with the Platinum President with a coarse nib in it. In the video that I've referenced in the description, I show the other nibs from Platinum, the Ultra Extra Fine and Schuts writing. So this nib I just wanted to put in comparison because I think with the music nib and the Naga Togi nib, this one fits in with that. This feels fine in the hand. That section's a good size. I'll give you links also to the 74 review and this review in case you want to dive into it, in case you haven't seen them already. Let's just see how that coarse nib puts down ink. I'm very happy with the Platinum. As I use the pen more and more since my initial review, I've grown to really enjoy the nib more and more. It's a little on the soft side. I'm surprised that the ink dries as quick. This is Birmingham Pens Turquoise. So this is, I think, an interesting review. Hopefully you've liked it. I'm not going to do a usual thank you in writing, but I will say thank you very much for watching. We've reached the end of this video. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, interjections, thoughts to share, leave a comment. And hopefully you've already subscribed. If not, please subscribe. I'm close to 10,000 subscribers, so it doesn't hurt to break that numerical threshold. In closing, I hope all of you are safe, healthy, and happy, so you can enjoy your pens, enjoy putting ink on paper, enjoy doing all the things that you love, and finding new things that you might love doing. So we're going to say bye until the next video.